All right, well, welcome everybody to Zero and Beyond, creating demand, market demand for zero energy. This course is approved for 1 hour in continuing education units, CVCI, AIA, HSW, AIVD, NARI Green, Certified Green Professional, and may be applicable to your local state-based design or contractor license. My name is Brett Little. I'm the executive director here at the Green Home Institute, and today I'll be your moderator. The Green Home Institute is a nonprofit with a mission to empower people to make healthier and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. And a huge thanks to all of the folks and organizations who support us. Big thanks to our big Platinum Plus sponsor, Andersen Windows, our members, volunteer presenters, as well as all of you for watching, and our board of directors. Couldn't do it without you. This session is actually a part of our now ongoing through this year and next year Zero Energy Capable webinar series. Basically, Zero Energy Capable concept is this idea of trying to craft some meaning behind what zero energy means. It's kind of the Wild West right now as far as what that means, and that's okay. I think it's okay to not necessarily have a definition. And so what we've done is sort of put some rules together on ensuring that a building or home is designed, is built, and tested through third-party inspections and verified to be zero energy capable if operated correctly by the users. And so there's an education component to that as well. And so we're recognizing homes and commercial and multifamily buildings all over that are meeting this challenge. And so you can check out on our website Zero Energy Capable Homes and what you can do to get there, to be inspired to get there. And then, of course, through this speaker series, we hope to give you potentially other definitions and pathways and educations to do it, because it's one thing to define it, but to actually get there and make sense out of it and create demand and find the financing to do it, those are the real challenges that we hope to work with folks to overcome. All right, so I am very excited here. We've been talking about this this session for some time now. But first, we're going to have our first presenter, Ann Edminster. She's a leading expert on green homes, assisting professionals in developing their capacity to create net positive projects. She's a principal developer of Lead for Homes, and she's also an author of Energy-Free Homes for Small Planet, a comprehensive guide for designers and builders seeking to create zero net energy homes. She chairs the Green Building Task Force for the U.S., Canada, and Mexico's Commission for Environmental Cooperation, serves on the board of the Net Zero Energy Coalition, and chaired the inaugural Net Zero Leadership Summit in October 2013. In that same year, she was named ACI's first Woman of the Year. And then co-presenting with her, talking about some actual case studies I've been doing, I have that is Susan McFadden. She's a development consultant for Revive, the first zero energy community in Colorado, and grand prize winner of the 2016 Department of Energy Housing Innovation Award for Multifamily, and winner of the 2016 Department of Energy Housing Innovation Award for Production Homes. Very excited to have her here. And then briefly, right before we get to Ann, we're going to hand it over to Shilpa of the Net Zero Energy Coalition to explain us a little bit about what they're up to. So Shilpa, with that, please take it away.
Hi, everybody. This is Shilpa Sankaran with the Net Zero Energy Coalition. I'm the executive director, and I just want to spend a couple minutes giving you guys a little context about who we are. So our sole purpose of existence is to coordinate efforts across the industry by uniting the industry around collective impact actions. And what that means, very simply, is that in order to get to zero energy and for us to reduce carbon emissions from the built environment significantly, there is an untapped opportunity that exists between all of the efforts that are happening right now. And we did a study a couple years ago. We've held many summits with all the leaders in the zero energy space, and we found through all of these efforts that there are hundreds at least a couple hundred organizations in North America that are working towards zero energy. This is not including the builders and the developers. And they're doing all of this great work, but scattered. And so our role is to try and bring it together, to accelerate efforts by joining forces, by combining resources, by sharing knowledge. And we're finding that this actually does create a faster path to zero energy. This graphic that you're looking at right now is something maybe some of you have seen before. It's called, the product diffusion curve, or the adoption curve, some people call it. But we're looking at where are we with zero energy today, and Anne is going to tell you more about why we think we are here. But at the early stages, for those of you who don't know, we have the innovators. These are the people who tinker and try and take risks. Where we really want to be is the orange space. That's where we're going to start to see change. To get there, we need to rope in the early adopters. Now, some of them have already begun to build zero energy buildings. These are the folks who take a little less risk, but they're still on the leading edge, and they're way out in front of the mass market. They're not waiting for other people to tell them this is a good idea. They're just doing it. They're just looking at it from a business perspective, from a long-term reward perspective, from a differentiation perspective. So we're in that early stage of early adopters. Our entire goal right now is to get all of these early adopters on board, because they are the link to the mass market, which is the early and late majority. And that's when we're going to start to see change. We need to do it soon. We need to do it fast. We have, our 2 degrees Celsius from COP21 that we need to stay under. Zero carbon is really the only way for us to get there. So collective impact, we're gathering a number of players. You'll see some of their logos here soon, to create a common agenda, shared measurements around that agenda. So what is our success? Reinforcing activities. We're convening these folks on a regular basis, and we're the backbone organization. The reinforcing activities include 2 basic pillars of the Net Zero Energy Coalition's efforts, and Anne's going to talk more about this. One is we're launching next year a national campaign to inspire the industry to do the kinds of things that Sue, who's going to present later, to do what she's doing, and to show them why it's rewarding and why it's going to be prosperous for them to do so. With that campaign, on the flip side, what do we do if we're excited now to build zero energy? Well, you go to something we're going to call the Z Hub, and that will be a centralized resource of information that we curate for building, designing, and selling zero energy. So that's what we're up to. I hope you guys are excited about moving forward. All of these folks that you see, oops, did I forward it? On this slide, these are just some of the folks that are involved with our collective impact initiatives. And as you can see, these are big organizations. These are small organizations. These are just all over the place, all over the U.S., all over North America. It's really the building of a movement that's happening, and you're going to see it coming, to a town near you very, very soon if you're not already on board. And with that, I'll hand it over to Anne.
Great. Thanks, Shilpa. That was a super introduction to the coalition and who we are and our reason for existing. The next thought on the agenda here goes to covering what for most of you may perhaps be extremely obvious, but we've learned from experience not to skip over this step, because inevitably if we do, someone at the end says, gee, but what exactly is zero net energy? So we're going to just start there very briefly in case we have anyone new to the concept with us today. So zero net energy is the notion of taking a home and making it first highly efficient through energy efficiency strategies, so efficient that the remainder of the energy needs can be provided through renewable energy supply, typically on site, although not everyone agrees that that's a necessity, and certainly it's not possible for every project. But that's the very, very basics of it. There are a ton of nuances that are possible to go into there that can be fodder for many, many hours of discussion, but we won't go there today. So, and in our zero energy projects, there are certain quite predictable basic ingredients. We typically see a very efficient form of the building, the orientation such that we take advantage of the sun and other natural forces at play on the site. A really, really good thermal enclosure is critical to keep the loads as low as possible. We then meet those loads with the smallest practicable HVAC solutions, so heating, ventilating, and cooling. And those loads are now, of course, much smaller than they are in a typical home. So it's really important that we also select the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning loads, equipment and strategies suitable to those low loads, which is sometimes more challenging than it might seem, certainly more challenging than it ought to be, but the industry is catching up. Then we have the plug loads to be met, and in some ways the plug loads are the wild card because these are often things introduced by homeowners, and probably there's no one in the house today who hasn't heard the lament of the home that would be net zero if only it weren't for the owners or the occupants. But we do what we can in the way of specifying best-in-class electric loads and guiding the occupants to those selections when they're not within the control of the design and construction team. Finally, when everything possible has been done to keep the loads as low as possible, we provide renewable energy supply with the result that we achieve a net zero energy home. Incidentally, you'll often hear the terms zero net energy, net zero energy, zero energy. These are essentially all interchangeable, and the industry in general is migrating to the simpler term of zero energy. The idea is net, we're referring to the energy use and the energy production evening out over the course of a year, but that's a little bit math geeky for general conversations, and so we're going with the KISS principle and sticking with zero energy whenever possible. Another qualifier worth adding here is that also, like so many things, we're not looking for perfection here. So zero energy, broadly writ, can represent homes that are approaching zero energy, capable of zero energy, sometimes even outproducing their own demand. So it's a spectrum of performance around zero energy. There are also some emerging components in zero energy homes, things that we are beginning to see and expect to see quite a bit more of over the next couple of years. The first is performance dashboards, and this again relates to the occupant element of the zero energy home, which says, well, if we want occupants to maintain a zero operating energy status for the home, we need to really provide them with the tools to facilitate that. And that's what the performance dashboard does. And the ideal dashboard has the attributes shown up here in the bullet list. Increasingly, we're also seeing electric vehicles as part of the equation. So the renewable energy array, which is typically photovoltaics, is sized to meet not only the other plug loads in the home, but the vehicle loads, or at least for one electric vehicle, getting the whole household that much closer to having a zero energy footprint for their lifestyle, as opposed to simply the loads that occur within the house. And then finally, battery storage is something that is just barely peeked its head above the horizon and is going to be very much a rising star in the next couple of years as the battery storage becomes more and more cost effective and available to more of the market. In fact, I read a brief news blast the other day that just said with Tesla's new version of the Powerwall, they're able to provide, I think, twice as much energy storage in the same physical size package as they were with their first edition. So that technology is really coming along quite rapidly. Okay, having covered what is zero energy, and particularly in a residential context, it's worth looking at the fact that this is a phenomenon that really is global. It is by no means something that is happening only in North America. So very exciting to see that our progressive energy counterparts around the world are creating not just zero energy homes in many, many countries and across continents, but they're also being done at community scale. So not necessarily one home at a time, but sometimes entire neighborhoods, schools, commercial developments, entire towns that are making a policy to adopt zero energy. So this is something that really is moving very, very rapidly from the scale of a single building to something much, much larger. Now, during 2015, the Net Zero Energy Coalition performed our first inventory of zero energy residential activity across the U.S. and Canada. And we did this through outreach to a number of partner organizations as well as a host of individuals known to many of us to be active in the zero energy space. And through inventory, we located upwards of 6,000 residential units in about half that many discrete buildings and more than 400 projects. So obviously a project represents multiple units and in many cases multiple buildings. So that was pretty exciting to understand clearly what isn't the absolute zero starting point of the zero energy movement, but it's the first time that anyone had benchmarked where are we today, how many zero energy units. And we certainly recognize that we will not have captured every single unit at the time our inventory concluded at the end of 2015. However, we think we got a pretty healthy fraction of those that are out there. And we're now embarked on our second inventory. So in the next couple of months, you can be looking ahead to our next inventory for 2016, and that we do expect to publish that and announce it in the first quarter of 2017 with some new numbers. We already know the numbers are going to be bigger. It's just a question of how much bigger, but we have hints that it could be quite dramatically bigger. So I'll just leave you with that little bit of excitement and suspense. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of nuances and different ways of looking at what is zero energy project and how are they defined. For simplicity in terms of our inventory, we broke those down into 4 categories. And you'll see in this little pie graph, the largest chunk of the pie, 41.7%, we found were zero energy ready homes. And zero energy ready, besides being the largest number, is also sort of the most, I'm going to say, broadest category of zero energy homes. So these are homes that may have solar arrays, but they don't quite bring the homes to zero energy status, or they may have created space on the roof and put in infrastructure to allow for the addition of solar at a later date, but it hasn't been installed yet, or they may simply have met all of the specifications, for example, of the Department of Energy's Zero Energy Ready Homes program without solar. And premise of the DOE program is that solar may be more economically provided through a community scale operation or through other collective purchasing arrangements, And so their program is really agnostic as to where the renewable energy comes from. However, they have a very rigorous set of specifications as to the homes themselves and how they need to be built to be deemed zero energy ready. So that's the bulk of the units that we've identified in the first inventory. The next largest segment, at just over a quarter of the homes, were zero energy, meaning they have at least met their own annual energy load typically with on-site renewable energy. Our next category are 1,000 Home Challenge. Now, these are a somewhat unique category. 1,000 Home Challenge is a specific program of retrofits of existing homes, and those are cases where they are not merely doing building interventions, but they're often behavioral interventions that the occupants undertake to get themselves to a deep energy reduction level that enables them to achieve zero net energy. And our final category, the smallest but pretty much neck and neck with 1,000 Home Challenge, are the net producers. And these are homes that have stated that they are producing 10% or more in excess of meeting their own needs. I think it's important to qualify, too, that in our inventory, these are self-reported projects and self-reported results. So these are not audited, they're not validated or verified, except to the extent that projects may have participated in distinct programs that have their own verification components. And that is certainly true in the case of again, the DOE program, the International Living Future Institute's Net Zero Energy Building Program, Earth Advantage Institute's Zero Energy Program, as well as the various passive house programs, which all have zero energy levels within them. And then again, also 1,000 Home Challenge identifies projects. They are only qualified as 1,000 Home Challenge if they achieve the deep energy reductions, typically 70% or more below conventional counterparts, but they also will verify when those homes have achieved net zero energy. So that is kind of the program rundown, and the partner organizations who were most critical in working with us in developing these categories and assembling the inventory. Okay, that's a lot to digest. Now we go to some of the other really intriguing findings. We found, first of all, you can see from the two black blocks on this slide that the split between multifamily units and single-family units was virtually right down the middle. So multifamily is as big a player in this whole arena as single-family. That's interesting in and of itself. Even more interesting was the realization that 95% of the units are in projects greater than 1 unit. And so it took a heartbeat or two for this to sink in. What does this mean? What it means is, since these are projects of greater than 1 unit, these are not owner-driven projects, custom homes, simply for the privileged and motivated few who want to build their own single-family zero-energy home. What this means is there are actually developers and builders who are building projects for sale or for tenants, and they're doing so in the belief that they will have the demand. And in fact, that is proving to be the case. So they are meeting a demand even when that demand has not been expressed in the market. So it's an implicit demand, and in fact, these projects are all fully occupied and in many cases are being sold or occupied at a more rapid rate than competing units in their marketplaces. So this is happening by the leading builders saying, I'm going to get out in front and create demand. I know it's there. We're going to provide this to our buyers and sell the benefits, and we're going to therefore prove the value of this rather than waiting for the market to stick its hand in the air and say, hey, anybody got a zero-energy home for me? Because we still don't necessarily have a lot of people who would even know to ask that that is a product that they might have. So it's a very exciting phenomenon to recognize that this is a movement that is really driven by the innovators in this space. And where is that innovation happening the fastest? There's some more findings from our inventory. So you'll see in the top half of this graph that we have the top 5 states, with California having a startling lead over even the other next 4 combined. And as you'll note in the text above this little state silhouettes, the top states all have policies and programs that are really driving this market for zero energy. So that has a big factor in all of this. California, where I live, we have had for quite a few years now an executive order in place that says all new residential construction in the state will achieve zero net energy by 2020. Well, 2020, folks, from a project timeline and entitlement process is really starting to look just around the corner. And so this is really, really picking up here. Massachusetts, I think, was the next place to really start to establish policies and programs. Quite a bit happening in Alberta, our cousins to the north. And then we're also seeing activity in Arizona and New York. Now, second set of metrics on this page are where are the builders who are producing the most units. So these stats are a little bit different, but we're still seeing clusters in our, the western states and the northeast. So these are definitely the geographic areas where we're seeing the most leadership in the zero energy construction activity. Here's how it breaks down with a little bit more detail. I'm not going to walk you through all these numbers, but it's interesting to scan what some of these are and recognize that some of these towns you may never have heard of before. I certainly hadn't. And inevitably, there is something going on in these towns, too, that is driving these projects. And we might save some of that detail for another webinar, but this will give you a general notion about where things are happening. Now, another view of this is where are some of the policy drivers, and this may foreshadow where we will start to see the next blips in activity with our 2016 inventory. We are fully anticipating that we're going to see all of these areas pop up with even more activity than they have before. Now, these particular cities are all participants in an initiative that's part of the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, and that group has a subset called the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance. And the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance has brought together these cities who have all said, we want to work very aggressively on our climate change plans and specifically on building sector initiatives, because we recognize that the building sector is a huge, huge part of the climate change solution set, and we want to move their work ahead as fast as possible. We're going to do that through collaboration. And so there's been a very active effort to have these cities work together, leverage one another's experience, and also move ahead some joint projects, which I'm sure will be the subject of a webinar in the future. So, as Shilpa mentioned earlier in our time segment, there are 2 major projects that the coalition is working on right now as collective impact initiatives with our partner. The first one is a campaign, and the campaign is based on the premise of creating momentum through leadership. So the examples that we've shown you today, the numbers that are driven by these innovative builders, we are going to parlay their successes and use them as examples to inspire others to start building zero-energy projects today, because nobody really wants to be first, or very few people want to be first. They would much rather follow a proven example. And we hear this over and over again. Well, who's done it? What did they do? What can we learn from them? So we're in a field where my colleague, Dennis Creech from South Face Institute, which Brett mentioned earlier, Dennis with his lovely Southern accent says, we call those case studies. That means copy and steal everything, y'all. So we're helping to provide case studies that can be copied and stolen happily for the benefit of all. So those case studies will reside in what we are calling our Z Hub, a clearinghouse with a myriad of zero-energy resources to facilitate adoption by helping connect those who want to build zero-energy with the resources that will enable them to do so. And as I mentioned, case studies, the case study database will be the first component of Z Hub, and we've been developing a case study database with the Northeast Sustainable Energy Association, adapting a database that they originally created to support a zero-energy competition in their region. Well, they've now got so much zero-energy activity in the Northeast that they've decided to discontinue the competition, and they have been kind enough to allow us to adopt and, what's the term I'm looking for, evolve their case study database for broader use by a larger set of stakeholders. And so we have already done the first incarnation of that adaptation. It's alive and well, and the URL is up here on the screen for you to go visit. And we will be working on yet another evolution of that database in the months to come to enhance it even more. So, for example, Brett, you mentioned the Green Home Institute Zero Energy Capable program. We hope to be able to support programs like yours as well through this case study database, the goal being not everybody should have to create their own, that we want to make the best use of the resources we have. And I believe that is almost it. The last thing I really wanted to leave you with is this eye-opening quote from Lux Research. This movement that we are building has tremendous potential for growth and tremendous opportunity for profit for those who jump in and get active in this, which is going to be a very, very big part of the coming years in the building industry. So if you weren't excited before, then I hope these numbers excite you to get involved, because we need everybody to build this movement as fast as possible. So please do join us. It is a movement, it's fun, and it's unstoppable. Thank you for your time. I'm now going to turn the mic and the screens over to my colleague Sue McFadden with Revive. Sue is a coalition partner who's been building phenomenal projects in Colorado, and really excited for you to hear about how she, as one person and one organization, is really driving this ahead in her region to provide an exciting, inspiring example for all of you. Now over to you, Sue.
Thank you very much, Ann. We're really excited to be part of this webinar to show you what we've done in Fort Collins, Colorado. We're Revive. We're a small 86-home community, and here's our site plan. The developer actually acquired this 10-acre property with the streets and the utilities already installed. So we didn't get to pick the solar orientation. A lot of it was already predetermined for us. So you don't need to have the perfect site to go net zero. You can go net zero just with what you have. We went in and replatted this site, and we ended up with 18 duplexes. They're single-family homes with a carriage house in the back. We have 37 townhouses, 3 mixed-use commercial buildings. We put in a community garden, 2 orchards, and then we took our detention pond and turned it into a community park. We have a lot of pervious pavers that help us with stormwater infiltration, but the orientation was a major challenge in the first part to determine how we could go net zero. There was geothermal wells installed before we acquired this property. So we knew we wanted to go geothermal, and then Solar City approached us with a very good developer discount, and so we thought we could get to net zero. We looked a lot at Lead Indy, and we did a whole Indy study on the site. We also looked at Energy Star, and we wanted to be more green than Energy Star. So we ended up going with the Zero Energy Ready Home program from the Department of Energy. Sam Raskin started the Energy Star program at EPA and then went over to the Department of Energy and started the Zero Energy Ready program. We really liked this program because it's not only Energy Star, which is energy efficient and solar ready, but it's indoor air plus, so it has really good indoor air quality, and it's water sense, so we're not wasting water. We can get water to any tap within so many seconds at a certain temperature. So for our values and homes of the future, we thought this was the best program out there, and this would be the most value to our home buyers. The Zero Energy program has quantifiable metrics in several different ways. So it's not only just a very energy efficient, great program, but that energy efficiency gives us great comfort too. We don't have drafts. It's very quiet on the inside. The people that are living in our homes now are really impressed by the comfort and quality of the homes, not only the energy efficiency, and so we're really happy about that. I think you've all seen the HERS thermometer. If you build a house to code today, it would get a HERS rating of 100. A typical resale home would be 130, and that's a very large standard deviation on that number. An Energy Star house would have a HERS rating of about 75, and our homes without any solar come in at about 40 because we have good insulation, we have good windows, orientation. They say eat your vegetables first, and that's what we did to get a HERS rating of 40. And then when we put solar on, our homes come in net zero. How does that translate to the owners? Compared to an existing home, our 3-bedroom homes would save about $2,335 a year, or compared to a new home, it would save about $1,800 a year. Colorado had a Colorado mortgage incentive up until this last June that would provide an $8,000 credit at closing, and that actually covered the cost of our solar. So we could get our homes net zero by using that $8,000, and it was a major help to get this program off the ground. So we now have 12 duplexes already built. They're single-family homes with a carriage house in the back. And then we have 37 townhouses, 10 of which are built so far. They're 3-story, 2 bedrooms, 2-car garages. It's so fun to see the competition within the owners going on there. The man on the far left produces 3 times as much energy as he uses, and the couple on the far right nets out, but they have a big freezer in the garage, and they have their ceiling fans going all the time. And so all the owners are exchanging energy bills, and it's just a very fun community to be a part of. Our first home came in with a HERS rating of -16. For all you that are aware of what HERS means, a -16 means that this home produces 16% more energy than an average family would use. So we were pretty proud of that result. Our site also has solar street lights, which saves us a lot of money, both on the installation. We saved a couple $100,000 on that. But the number one cost to any HOA is the utilities. And since we have them all solar powered, we're not connected to the utilities. And so our HOA saves money also. This is an example of our North Star model. It won the best home in our parade of homes. It has a HERS rating of -9. I ended up buying it, but the thing I want to show you about this is this home looks just like any other modern home. It has a beautiful kitchen with Energy Star appliances. We have ceiling fans. We have plenty of lighting. They're all LED lights. It's just your average American home, new home. So you don't have to build a gulag or just anything crazy. Any home can be net zero. What we did differently about our homes, they're built on a 2x6 plate. They're a staggered 2x4 wall. We use zip board insulation instead of house wrap. Our ceilings are R50, our walls are R23. A thing that we do very differently is to do closed cell foam under our slab, and we use concrete floors, which are very well liked. We have great windows. The air sealing is probably our biggest challenge. At the beginning, we had to really train our trades on the air sealing part. Our new townhouses just came in under 2 on air sealing, which we were really, air changes per hour, which we're really happy about. That requires more days for us to do insulation than a normal house. So there's more steps and more attention to detail. We use geothermal heat pumps for both our heating and cooling systems. They were already installed. Our energy modeling would have told us to use air source heat pumps, but since we already had them in the ground, we have pipes that go 350 feet deep. That ground temperature is a constant 57 degrees. So we heat and cool from 57 to 72 degrees. And then in the summertime, we just run the heat pumps backwards and cool off our houses using the heat pump. It's super efficient. It has a coefficient of performance of almost 4, which is really exceptional. We use all LED lighting. We have Energy Star appliances. And then as far as the testing, we have to do blower door tests anyway. And so adding on the DOE challenge, it costs us about $450 more per house to have it certified by a third party that we really have this energy rating. And I think that's really well worth it. Here's an example of the closed cell foam insulation on the slab. One of the interesting things, this house is completely monitored. Every time you flush a toilet, the city of Fort Collins knows it. Our geothermal contractors are monitoring the house. The solar people are monitoring the house. This graph, the green shows how much solar is produced. It has 8.5 kilowatts of solar on it. And then the red is the energy load of the house. And so here's a all electric modern house. And you can see the demand, the base demand is less than 2 kilowatts. These big spikes in red is the electric car charging station, and that's the major demand for this house. It's a 1,700 square foot house, and I run a i3 electric car off of it. The other spikes are when you turn on the shower or the washer and dryer. But the base load on the house is very low, which really helps the utilities. So we're running this house on less than what a hairdryer would be. Here's the utility bills so far in the house. In Fort Collins, we're on net metering. So this is how much electric use we pulled from the grid, not the amount of electric use from the solar. So at nighttime, this would be the use that we're pulling from the grid. And then the electric return is how much energy we're putting back on the grid in the daytime that we're not using internally in the house. And then the last column is the total amount of the bill, and that includes the base charge, which has gone from $8 to $20 a month. So in October, my house earned $57, and in other months we're earning money. So I don't know how many people out there are actually making money from their utility every month, but everyone in our neighborhood is really excited about that idea. We did a lot of energy modeling, both using NREL and ResNet. And our energy modeling said that for a house with a 1,700 square foot house with a HERS rating of 130, the energy cost would be at roughly $3,000 a year. And our houses model out to have an energy cost of negative $146 a year with a HERS rating of -9. These houses are actually way overperforming what we're seeing. Probably this house will come in at maybe -$500 this year. So we're really excited that the performance is outdoing the energy modeling that we've done on these houses. When we look at the climate action perspective of this, ResNet models this, and we actually have a negative carbon footprint. We have no natural gas to the site, so it's all electric, and all of our electric is produced through the solar panels. This doesn't take into account the embodied energy. I totally understand that. But if you're going to build a new house, I think a net zero house is the wave of the future and what we need to do. And even compared to an Energy Star house, we save 9.9 tons of carbon dioxide, 21 tons of sulfur dioxide, and 29 tons of nitric oxides per year, which is really great compared to an Energy Star house. So I think everybody in our community really cares about leaving a better legacy for future generations. And so when we build houses that are better for the environment, we all feel a lot better about that. The economics, for us, the geothermal was a huge cost increase. The good thing is that there's a 30% federal tax credit. So the system with all the drilling and all the equipment, we could write off, and you can get a $12,000 tax credit for that. But you could also just go with a very highly efficient furnace and a highly efficient water heater and get to net zero. You wouldn't have to go the geothermal route, but for us, it's been a really great thing. When we took into account the Colorado Energy mortgage incentive of $8,000, and our city started out with a $5,000 solar rebate, and it's now down to $1,500. So the additional cost on our houses is roughly $20,500, and that's including the more air sealing, the more insulation, all the additional things. And if we save $2,000 a year, the simple payback would be roughly 8.4 years. The IRR would be about 11%, which is far better than any bank that you'd be investing that money in. And then if you look at it from a mortgage perspective, if you added $20,000 to your mortgage at 4% over 30 years, that would add about $98 a month to your mortgage, but you would be saving $166 a month in energy. So would you give me $100 a month if I could save you $150 a month? That sounds like a pretty good profit. So from a consumer's perspective, net zero homes still make sense. So the end result was we did go and apply for the Housing Innovation Award this year with the Department of Energy. And we won both in our production home category and in multifamily, which we were really pleased with because we had never done this before. It was really exciting to see. And then we went to Dallas for the awards ceremony, and we won the grand prize for multifamily homes. We tied with Thrive, another builder out of Denver, who we actually copied a lot of stuff from Thrive. They were the first net zero builders in Colorado, and so we learned a lot from them, and we put our own mark on it up here in Fort Collins. So we collaborated with them really well, and that's one thing I would say is go around and look at other builders who have done it and try to learn as much as you can from them, and then go do it your own way. But it's a great challenge, but it's very doable, and anybody can really do it. You just need to have the commitment to do it. And so my final thought comes from Teddy Roosevelt, that you're going to have a lot of critics out there that say you can't do this, it's too expensive, blah, 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 blah. And if you just have the leadership to say, okay, I'm going to do this, our team is committed to doing this, you find the way to do it, and you're all super proud of it, and at the end, you have a great achievement, and you're leaving a great legacy for future generations. So I hope everyone jumps on this bandwagon, and I'm really glad that Ann and Shilpa and Brett are all trying to get the message out that we can all do this and make a big difference. That's all I have. Anybody have any questions?
Hey, Susan, thanks a lot. Really appreciate your time with this. I'm going to go ahead and unmute all of our speakers so we can start taking some questions. Right before we dive into the questions, though, I know the thing that's on many folks' mind is continuing ed, so I just want to be clear on that and start putting your questions in as we're going through this. But for those of you here attending live right now, looking for CEUs, check your email, check your spam, and you'll get an email. It's not a formal certificate, but it's an email that can be used as a certificate. Take the survey in that email, and then all GVCI is self-reporting, and if you need AIA, take that survey. We'll report it for you. For those of you in the future watching this on demand, the recording, not any of you right now, complete the 10-question quiz with a 70% pass rate, and you can pick your CEUs up that way. So we got a lot of questions that poured in here, and so I want to make sure I can get to some of these questions here. And I think this one is a really good question here from Menard. Why is net positive, and we experience this in our own state of Michigan, even trying to get to zero is difficult. Why do many utility grid operators want to make it so difficult, or maybe perhaps not even make it legal in your design of your systems to get to net positive or net zero energy?
Oh, that's a very interesting one. There's very, very different sensibilities from one utility to the next. Some are more progressive and embracing of zero net energy and net positive than others, but there certainly are those who have a more, what I would say, regressive and fear-based approach, and it seems to be based on a concern that the grid is really set up to deliver electricity in one direction. And, you know, those of us who aren't that technical go, hey, it's all electrons, what's your worry? But, you know, I think that's probably oversimplifying it. So those who know better about the utility have said to me there are some legitimate concerns about the fact that the utility grid really isn't set up for two-way movement of power, and so there's just a lot of fear or uncertainty about the capability of the grid to handle that, especially when there's going to be quite a lot of growth in that area. And what it really translates to is, oh my God, we're going to have to evolve and change. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know what it's going to cost, how long it's going to take, or how big of a challenge it's going to be. So, you know, from a business perspective, I understand all those concerns. It doesn't necessarily make them easy partners to work with all the time, but there you have it.
In our community, we can go 120% positive on our net zero. The big thing is the cost of the infrastructure. The utility isn't getting paid when we put it back on the grid, and so they don't want you to be a major power producer and use all their infrastructure for free. And so some way there has to be more equal sharing of the cost of the infrastructure.
Yeah, that is a big part of that too, is that it is going to really require restructuring the utility business model too. Right. You know, electrons aside, that is definitely the other big issue.
Great, thanks. Yeah, here's a question from Ben. Do you have any resources that explain how housing developers can take the 30% federal tax credit on the houses that they sell? I've got development of net zero homes in Chicago, and I haven't been able to get a straight answer on this.
The 30% comes to the resident that buys the house. There's a $2,000 tax credit to any builder that builds a net zero house, and that's the IRS tax codes, and our accountants seem to be able to do that quite well. And do you guys, or Shilpa, on your website, do you have something?
I don't know that we do, but this is the sort of information that we will be amassing as we build out more elements of the hub. Because right now, the first element that we have up and operational is the case study database, but definitely this type of financial information is another part. Another website for people to be aware of is DSIRUSA.org, which is nominally a database of state energy incentives. However, it actually also includes many federal and local level incentives, so you can probably find some resources there, and it's a website that is updated surprisingly frequently, so always a good place to start.
If I understood right, there was a for those who construct the homes, own them, and then sell them, and use the HERS index rating and hit like a 55 or something, there are some tax credits for that as well. Susan, did your team use that at all?
We give it to the buyer to go apply for and use.
Yeah, I think this one was actually, it had to be for the development owner could only get it, so I didn't know if you came across that or not.
That's the $2,000 for the builder tax credit.
Yeah.
And all of that expires at the end of 2016.
Sure.
And so the presidential election was going to be key to whether that would get renewed or not. We don't know what the situation is on that.
Okay. Well, that's a great transition into the next question. Given the recent political direction that we're headed into and some concerns about the support for environmental tasks or environmental issues, I guess, what does everybody think in regard to
Brett, I think you're breaking up. This is Shilpa. I'll just jump in since you're breaking up there. And I'd love to hear everyone else's thoughts too, but we don't know what the new administration's policies will be yet, but we all have our potential guesses. But what's happening, what we've found so far is the work we're doing with the campaign, with the hub, with all of our members and our partners' projects are primarily being driven by private industry and local and city policies. So it remains fairly parallel to what's happening with the federal government. People are still very positive. People are actually making deeper commitments at this point to zero energy as a result. I live in Madison, Wisconsin. I just saw something issued by the city where they just implemented a new climate action policy yesterday. And so I think more is happening at the city level by those who want to be empowered. Certainly there's going to be, with renewable energy, there will be challenges financially, but the cost of solar is low as it is without incentives. So there will be ways to make this work. But the other thing is we sent a survey out last week after the elections, and what we were hearing from our people was that this is going to actually increase innovation within their organizations. And so while you're going to see potentially issues with, the federal tax incentives, the energy efficiency measures and product innovation is going to ramp up and perhaps bring the cost down. So all of this is happening within our world. We're seeing costs going down, more activity, more developers ready to take the plunge with zero energy, and we hope that our efforts are also pushing us forward further.
Great, thanks.
And do you have anything?
I guess I would just, re-emphasize what you're saying, Shilpa, which is that we learned at our first Net Zero Leadership Summit in October 2013, that's now more than 3 years ago, that there was really the greatest opportunity to influence the zero energy movement by getting active with city officials. And I think everything that we've seen since then reinforces that that is really the most fruitful arena for activism in this area. So go talk to your elected officials, get building sector measures enacted in local climate action plans, and those are going to be fairly immune from whatever mishigas is happening at the federal level. So, and there's also a building effect that we've seen through municipal initiatives that start very grassroots with citizens saying, we need this to happen in our community, that then can roll up and start to create a snowball effect at state level. So there's just really no better place to be active than in your own community.
Thanks, Ann. And I think this next question might be for you as well. Maybe you can just talk real briefly the difference when you're assessing for zero energy or coming up with a plan for it in, let's say zero carbon versus actual zero energy, electric and gas mixed together usage.
Yeah, well, right now a big topic of conversation here in California, and I know elsewhere, is decarbonization. So, right, if climate change and greenhouse gases are the real target of our efforts, why are we talking about zero net energy? Why are we not talking about zero carbon? So, and certainly that conversation is in transition, and we may very well see the nomenclature shift. In the meantime, I think we've all recognized that those of us who are working in this field we call zero energy, that it really is zero carbon or zero carbon equivalent that we're after, and that is driving most players in this arena to look much harder at the fuel choices. And in most cases, that results in drawing the conclusion that we really do need to be looking at electrification of all possible uses. There are certainly some opportunities for the creation of sustainable methane, but we're a ways off from seeing that being a large, widespread solution. And whereas electrification is pretty much available to us, the barriers to electrification are dual. There are some, again, at the utility level, also certainly in terms of political will. There's some resistance in the consumer community to cooking with electricity. Those are being overcome pretty rapidly as induction cooking is taking over. So there are a whole host of things. I'd say in some ways the biggest obstacles can be some codes in California. For example, our energy code, fondly referred to as Title 24, does have some disincentives for electrification in it because of concerns about increasing peak electric loads. So very active campaign right now in the state to start to try to address those barriers to electrification. That was a long dissertation. I hope that answered the question.
No, very helpful. So I've got a question here before we get to one more, and if anyone else has any more, feel free to put them in there. But since we're talking about marketing, I've come across two issues. Like I'd like to get some thoughts on. The first one revolves around the DOE's program, and this is a personal experience. We've seen a project in Michigan, and I'm not going to name any names or point any fingers, where they were able to achieve this DOE program, and the newspaper that went out and did the marketing for them and got the word out, which was great. I mean, don't get me wrong, they promoted it as a zero energy project, and so people reading this think it's a no utility bill home, but in reality it's a home that was designed with a large enough lot to put a solar array on, not on the house but on the lot, which would probably look fairly ugly. I guess we all have our different opinions, but and so and that's just for the future. And so the concern there is someone ever actually going to do that? But some mismarketing there. The second thing to that is we hear this all the time: people wanting to just offset their electrical load. And up in the cold weather climate states where I'm at, the electrical load is a very small portion compared to your heating and natural gas usage or propane usage. And they think, if we can offset our electrical load with a few solar panels, then we've got a zero energy house or can sell it as a zero energy house. So, some of this marketing and terminology, what kind of thoughts do you have about that and how to approach that?
Well, geez, that's a little bit challenging. And in fact, when the zero energy phenomenon first started getting serious traction, which I'd say was about 10 years ago, and well, serious traction is probably an overstatement. Let's say when it was starting to get a foothold, toehold, most of the projects that were billed as zero energy were in fact zero net electricity. So that was kind of V1 of the net zero movement, and unfortunately that has sort of stuck in some areas, that there really is a perception that zero net electricity, it makes for a zero energy home, that people just, it doesn't occur to them that account for their natural gas. And I think in some ways that's sort of natural because we don't have mechanisms that readily allow us to aggregate all types of energy use into a single metric, right? We get a gas bill and electric bill, and even if we get the bills together, they are in different units and they're different dollar amounts. So that, I think, creates a real challenge to our energy literacy, which really translates down into this marketing and communications conundrum that we have around this. I do think, though, that as this field matures a little bit more, we will start to see less confusion around it, and you'll start to see more questions being asked. Oh, did you mean zero net energy or zero net electricity? Are you producing renewable energy on-site or off-site? I think we're going to start to be more inquisitive about what people mean about that. One conversation we've had over the past year is of the possibility through the coalition of developing a collaborative effort to create the equivalent of the universal nutrition label. So this is not a certification, it's not a rating, it's simply a transparency measure that would say, what is it we're talking about? And so I think there's a real opportunity to do that, and that will also aid clarity in this arena. But yeah, right now it is still the Wild West in that regard.
But as
Great,
far as
Ann.
trying to get consumers to buy into the idea of net zero, one of our biggest marketing tools is just to hand them a utility bill. And they see that you have minus $80 this month and you have $250 credit on your utility bill. I mean, everybody and their brother is like ready to buy a house out here just because they've never seen a negative utility bill. So it can be a real huge driver in the acceptance of net zero homes.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have here today, and I don't see any more questions. So, actually, I guess there is one final question, but I'll put it into my final wrap-up here. But I want to definitely want to thank Shilpa from the Net Zero Energy Coalition for helping us put all this together, and Edminster for leading the session, and then Susan for I really appreciate you bringing the tangible case study. Very helpful to see that it's actually happening out there. So I guess Ann, maybe you can tell us, where can people find more information if they want to sign up, if they want to learn more, and then add to that if they want to go to a conference. Do you have any conference recommendations?
Oh, great question. Certainly go to the NetZeroEnergyCoalition.com website for all kinds of information, and Shilpa publishes a pretty frequent newsletter for the coalition, so that be sure to go to the newsletter sign-up page on the coalition website, because that is a really great way of staying in touch with everything coming up. And let's see, I will actually be doing a keynote at Better Buildings Vermont in early February. And I know, of course, you mentioned the Better Buildings, Better Business Conference in Wisconsin coming up, which is also a wonderful conference. And here in California, we have the Dry Climate Home Performance Forum, which is in around the same time frame. All of these are close together, so you have to kind of be regional with these early.
And I just want to add, too, that we will be doing another residential track at the Getting to Zero Forum next fall. So that's the New Buildings Institute. They have the Getting to Zero Forum, which has historically been dedicated to commercial buildings, but we'll do a whole zero energy track. Stu spoke at that this year, and Ann and Sam Rashkin and a number of other folks.
I was going to say, Sam does wonderful training through the Department of Energy. It's just the nuts and bolts of how to get to net zero. I would definitely take one of his classes.
And I've found one other one that I also, the Living Future Unconference focuses on quite a lot. If you're just going there for zero energy, it could be overwhelming, but there is a lot of focus on net positive energy at the Living Future Unconference, which happens to typically happen in the Pacific Northwest area. And then I believe the Living Future Institute also has its own specific net positive energy and water conferences that tend to happen every year as well. So check that out at livingfuture.org. All right. Well, I thank, again, everybody, thanks for joining us for our weekly Wednesday webinar series here. go to our website, greenhomeinstitute.org, check out our further upcoming events, and you can check out recordings on our YouTube channel as well as our USGBC education channel. So thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Brett.